We found two people possibly dead. There's blood everywhere.
That 911 call coming in just before 2 a.m. Sunday morning from a passerby who saw the bodies of 48-year-old Terry Aultman and 55-year-old Brenda Aultman. They were lying on the ground at the corner of Wild Olive and Riverview. The couple had been stabbed to death, their bicycles found nearby. According to neighbors and social media, the couple had been hanging out at a bar on Main Street and were riding their bikes back home to the 300 block of Boylston Avenue. The two were murdered just 1 mile from their home. The couple's neighbors still in disbelief.
A little shaky, you know. I mean, I cannot believe that something like that happened here.
And he was a responsible guy. They even took bicycles because he was drinking. Yeah. Left their car, left his motorcycle here, left their car, left their truck here, and it was just a real shame what happened to him, you know.
Jesse Dillon lives next door to the Aultmans. He said the couple had just purchased their home 6 months ago, and they were beyond happy.
They walked to the beach every day. It was like their dream house. Yeah. You know, they bought bicycles. They just bought a Jeep. They were really loving it. They loved the neighborhood.
And the neighborhood loved them. Many describe the couple as the kind of neighbors that always wanted to do for those around them.
Yeah, real friendly. They're probably two of the best neighbors you could want. Yeah. Always friendly. I mean, he even trimmed all my trees there. He was just, you know, best neighbors I ever had, you know.
They were very nice people, very friendly. Yeah. I just, it's unbelievable, especially a cause of death like that.
Brenda Aultman's daughter says that she is also very saddened by what occurred. She says she is heartbroken right now. Her mother, Brenda, was her best friend, and her stepfather was such a wonderful man. Now, according to Daytona Beach police, they do have a person of interest in this case. They're looking for someone of unknown race who was last seen wearing light-colored pants and a backpack. Reporting in Volusia County, I'm Luana Munoz, WESH 2 News.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.
Daytona Beach was supposed to feel alive that night. Bike Week had filled the city with engine noise, music, neon, and crowds so thick that almost nobody expected danger to be waiting just a few streets away from the celebration. Main Street was doing what it always does during one of the biggest motorcycle rallies in the country. Visitors poured through bars and restaurants. Locals blended into the rush. The atmosphere was loud, chaotic, and carefree. For most people, it was just another late Florida night. But sometime after midnight on March 6, 2022, that energy ended in silence on a residential street near the beach. A married couple walking their bicycles home after enjoying the festivities were attacked only about a mile from their house. By the time they were discovered, there was nothing first responders could do. What initially looked in the darkness like some kind of terrible accident quickly became something much more disturbing. Investigators would soon conclude this was not random confusion, not a traffic collision, and not a bar fight gone too far. According to police, this was a brutal, deliberate attack on two people who, by all public accounts, had done nothing to provoke it. And that is what makes this case so unsettling. Because when investigators began piecing together the timeline, the question was not just who did this, it was why. Why this couple? Why here? Why on a night when the city was overflowing with witnesses, cameras, traffic, and noise? And perhaps most haunting of all, how could two people be so close to home, surrounded by a city that was still awake, and still become victims? And this is the case of Brenda and Terry Vann Aultman, a couple who had recently built the life they wanted in Daytona Beach, only to have that dream shattered in the final stretch of a ride home. Stay with me, because the deeper you go into this story, the stranger it becomes. What police said they uncovered through surveillance, a restaurant receipt, and a later confession would turn this from a terrifying unsolved attack into one of the most disturbing cases in Daytona Beach during Bike Week. But even after an arrest, the case did not become simple. It became darker, more complicated, and deeply unsettling in a completely different way. Brenda and Terry Aultman were not passing through Daytona Beach on a short vacation. Public reporting indicates they had recently made the city their home, and buying a house there only months before the attack. For them, Daytona was not just a destination, it was the place where they were supposed to enjoy a new chapter. That makes what happened next even harder to process, because this was not a case built around an obvious personal feud, a known grudge, or some publicly established dispute. According to investigators, there was no known connection between the couple and the man later accused of killing them. No clear feud, no public history, no long trail of warnings that might have explained how their names ended up in a homicide investigation. Instead, what authorities described was something much more frightening: an apparently unprovoked act against two ordinary people on their way home. And when you hear how close they were to safety, when how investigators traced the man they believed followed them, and how the legal fight later unfolded, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. This case is terrifying not only because of what happened, but because it seems to strike at one of the most basic comforts people rely on. The idea that if you are with someone you love, if you stay near well-lit areas, if you avoid risky behavior, if you make it almost all the way home, you should be okay. In this case, that comfort collapsed. And that is where our story begins. To understand why the killings of Brenda and Terry Aultman hit so hard, you have to start with the life they were building before everything went wrong. By all public accounts, this was a couple people genuinely liked. Family and friends described them as warm, funny, and happy together. Brenda was remembered as creative, caring, and full of personality. Terry, who was often known as Vann, was described by those around him as the kind of man who left a strong impression for the right reasons. He worked as a supervisor at an Amazon warehouse, and former co-workers spoke publicly about how steady and positive he was. These were not people who seemed surrounded by chaos. They were not publicly known for violent conflict, scandal, or instability. They appeared to be exactly what so many victims in cases like this are: ordinary people living ordinary lives, expecting ordinary tomorrows. And maybe that is what makes the story land with such force, because the public details suggest Brenda and Terry were doing something many people dream about. They had bought a home in Daytona Beach roughly 6 months before the attack. Friends and family said it felt like a dream come true. They walked to the beach often. They enjoyed the area. They were building routines. They were settling into the kind of life that sounds simple on paper, but meaningful in real life. A home near the water, time together, familiar streets, a future that seemed visible. Then Bike Week came. Every year, Daytona Beach transforms during this event. It is one of the city's most recognizable annual gatherings, bringing in huge crowds for racing, parties, concerts, motorcycles, food, and nightlife. The city becomes louder, busier, and less predictable. For visitors, that is part of the thrill. For residents, it is something they either brace for or enjoy depending on their perspective. But either way, it changes the rhythm of the place. Streets that normally feel manageable turn crowded. Where residential blocks sit just minutes away from scenes of noise and traffic. And with so many people moving through the city late into the night, anonymity becomes easy. That matters in this case, because on March 5th, 2022, Brenda and Terry joined the Bike Week atmosphere like countless others. They spent part of the evening on Main Street, where public reporting indicates Brenda even posted a photo of the two of them around 10:30 p.m., enjoying their night out. It is one of those small details that becomes painful in hindsight. A normal post, a normal evening, a snapshot taken before anyone could imagine it would become part of a homicide timeline. At some point after spending time in the area, the couple began heading home. They were using bicycles. That detail may sound minor, but it becomes important because it helps explain both the timeline and the vulnerability of those final minutes. They were not speeding away in a locked car. They were not separated in different directions. They were together, exposed, moving through public space at a pace slow enough to be followed. And according to investigators, that may be exactly what happened. The route home should not have felt especially alarming. They were not vanishing into some isolated highway or remote back road hours away from help. They were close to home, traveling through a city still alive from the rally. Yet sometime after 1 a.m., on North Wild Olive Avenue near Riverview Boulevard, that ordinary ride home became the center of a homicide investigation. When the couple was found in the early hours of March 6th, the scene immediately raised questions. And their bicycles were nearby. Their bodies were not simply positioned in a way that suggested an obvious crash. Responding officers, according to released footage and public reporting, quickly began to suspect something more sinister. What some witnesses first interpreted in the darkness as drunken people passed out, or perhaps the aftermath of an accident, began to look very different the closer responders got. Police realized early they were likely dealing with a targeted act of violence. That shift in understanding is one of the defining moments of the case, because before investigators had even identified the victims publicly, the scene itself was already telling them this was not likely the result of a random roadway impact. There were personal items scattered nearby. There was evidence suggesting movement and struggle. Officers began locking the area down, preserving the scene, and looking immediately for cameras. That reaction tells you something. In the first crucial moments, law enforcement understood they might be hunting not for a hit-and-run driver, but for a person who had been on foot. Someone who may have approached, attacked, and disappeared back into the night. And during Bike Week, that creates a nightmare scenario. A city overflowing with out-of-towners, streets full of movement, noise covering noise. So many people out late that one more person walking in the dark might not draw attention at all. That is where the case begins to tighten. Because the core mystery was not only who killed Brenda and Terry Aultman, it was whether the attacker had chosen them specifically, encountered them by chance, or moved through the city looking for an opportunity. Investigators would later say there was no known prior connection between the victims and the man accused. If that was true, then the implications were chilling. It meant the Aultmans may have been selected simply because they were there, a husband and wife trying to make it home after a public event. Nothing more. Cases like this unsettle people for a reason. There is no emotional distance. There is no complicated backstory required for the fear to make sense. Almost everyone understands the situation instantly. A late walk, a familiar route, a partner beside you, home just ahead, then something goes wrong, fast. But here is where the case took an even stranger turn. Investigators did not have a clear witness to the attack itself. No public reporting suggested that anyone directly saw the violence as it happened. That meant the earliest answers would have to come from fragments, surveillance footage, timing, witness movements, physical evidence, and whatever the attacker may have left behind in the city after the crime. The question became whether those fragments could identify a person before the Bike Week crowds swallowed him. And as detectives started pulling footage from nearby homes and businesses, they found something that would begin to change the entire case. A man had been seen in the area before the attack. Then, not long after the Aultmans appeared on camera walking their bicycles, that same man was seen moving in their direction. And suddenly, what had looked like an impossible case in a crowded city started narrowing toward a single figure in the dark. Once investigators started reviewing surveillance footage, the case shifted from chaos to pattern. That does not mean everything became clear. Far from it. But public reporting indicates that detectives were able to establish a sequence that gave structure to the night. And in a case where no one publicly reported witnessing the fatal attack itself, structure was everything. Timeline meant direction. Direction meant identity. Identity meant the possibility of an arrest before the trail went cold. According to police, one of the earliest significant images came from footage showing a man walking in Daytona Beach before the killings. He was later seen near the block where Brenda and Terry Aultman were attacked. And then came the detail investigators appear to have focused on most: surveillance that showed the couple walking their bicycles northbound toward home, and then, roughly moments later, showed the same man moving in the same direction behind them. That image changed the case, because if investigators were right, this was not simply a man who happened to be nearby. It suggested pursuit. It suggested awareness. It suggested that somewhere in those seconds between the couple passing through camera view and the suspect accelerating after them, a decision may have been made. And then about 15 minutes later, that man was seen again, this time heading away from the area. That did not prove everything, but it gave police a powerful starting point. Authorities circulated images of the person they wanted identified. They highlighted his build, his clothing, and especially distinctive tattoos. A reward was announced. Investigators told the public they believed the couple had been followed. Even before an arrest, that language mattered. It signaled that this was not being framed as an argument that spiraled. It was being investigated as a predatory act unfolding across public space. Then came one of the most extraordinary breaks in the case. A server at a Johnny Rockets on Seabreeze Boulevard contacted police after recognizing the man in the circulated images. According to reporting, he had eaten there on March 5th and paid by credit card, leaving initials on the receipt. That transaction gave investigators a name: Jean-Robert Massian. The discovery sounds almost cinematic, but it was rooted in something painfully ordinary: a meal, a receipt, a card payment. In a city full of cameras, crowds, and confusion, one of the clearest paths to a suspect reportedly came through a restaurant record. Police traced Massian back to Orlando, where he lived with family members. Investigators also learned, according to public reporting, that he had traveled to Daytona Beach by bus the day before the killings and left the following morning. That detail made the case feel even stranger. He was not a local figure, deeply embedded in the victim's world. There was no publicly established relationship between him and the Aultmans. No history tying these lives together. Authorities indicated this appeared to be a chance encounter. And if that was true, the randomness was terrifying. When police located Massian in Orlando, they detained him and searched the residence. Public reporting indicates they found clothing consistent with what had been seen in surveillance, along with multiple knives. One of those knives was reportedly believed by investigators to be the likely murder weapon. It was a major development, but it still did not answer the question that had been hanging over the case from the start. Why? Why Brenda and Terry Aultman? Why on that street? Why after following them? When Massian was interviewed, detectives appeared to use a soft, rapport-building approach. The publicly released portions of the interrogation became disturbing not because they were loud, but because they were so calm. According to reporting, he spoke with detectives in a relaxed manner for long stretches. He did not initially deliver a direct, coherent explanation. Instead, he pointed to alcohol, memory problems, stress, and personal pain, especially the recent death of his mother. At first, he reportedly denied key parts of the trip, or said he could not remember them. But as the interview continued and detectives confronted him with surveillance images placing him near the crime scene, his account shifted. Public reporting indicates he eventually admitted being in the area and described gaps in memory. Authorities later said he confessed to attacking the couple. Even then, the case did not become simple, because a confession can answer who, but it does not always fully answer why. And in this case, the motive remained disturbingly thin. Investigators publicly stated there was no clear nexus between Massian and the victims. No robbery narrative that fully explained it. No feud, no relationship. No obvious trigger rooted in anything the Aultmans were known to have done. That vacuum made every later legal question heavier. According to public reporting, Massian told detectives he had been drinking heavily and later described a kind of mental break or trance-like condition. He reportedly said that after the couple passed him, something drew him toward them. It was an explanation, but not one that gave comfort. In many ways, it deepened the horror. Because if the attack was truly as unprovoked as authorities suggested, then the most frightening part of the case was exactly how little separated Brenda and Terry Aultman from safety. They were simply there, in reach when the wrong person made the wrong decision. For the victims' families, of course, none of this repaired anything. Brenda's daughter spoke publicly after the killings, Juanita expressing the shock and devastation of losing her mother in a way no family should have to process. Friends and co-workers remembered both victims as loving, kind, and undeserving of what happened. And that is another layer that lingers in cases like this. The system can identify a suspect. It can make an arrest. It can gather evidence. But it cannot restore the ordinary life that was stolen in minutes. And then the case turned again. Because just when it seemed like detectives had solved a random double homicide with surveillance, physical evidence, and a confession, the courtroom battle moved away from what happened on that street and into a more complicated question. Whether the man accused of killing Brenda and Terry Aultman was mentally competent to stand trial. And that is where the story leaves the crime scene and enters a new phase entirely. A phase involving psychiatric evaluations, competing experts, claims of schizophrenia, allegations of malingering, arguments over trauma, and the possibility of a death penalty prosecution. The facts of the case did not disappear, but the meaning of responsibility, intent, and justice became much harder to define. And in some ways, that was the darkest turn yet, because now the case was no longer only about what happened that night in Daytona. It was also about whether the man accused of doing it fully understood what he had done, whether he was trying to manipulate the system, and what justice should look like when a crime appears both brutally simple and psychologically complicated. And the case moves from the street and the surveillance footage into the courtroom, where the legal fight over Jean-Robert Massian's mental state would stretch the case out for years and leave one final question behind. When a crime is admitted, but the mind of the accused becomes the battlefield, what does true resolution even look like? After the arrest, many people may have expected the case to move quickly toward trial. On paper, it looked strong. Investigators had surveillance placing Jean-Robert Massian near the victims. They had a trail that reportedly connected him to Daytona Beach. They had physical evidence recovered during the search, and public reporting indicated detectives had obtained admissions from him during questioning. In many homicide cases, that combination pushes the legal process forward with a sense of inevitability. But that is not what happened here. Instead, the case entered a prolonged and difficult fight over competency. Beginning in 2023, according to public reporting, Massian was at times found mentally incompetent to stand trial and was committed to a state psychiatric facility. Defense experts reportedly described serious mental illness, including schizophrenia spectrum symptoms, disordered thought processes, hallucinations, and significant trauma. There were also claims tied to his childhood and family background, including allegations of abuse that were raised in court proceedings. If those claims were true, they painted a picture of a deeply damaged person. But even that did not settle the issue, because prosecutors and state experts pushed back. Public reporting indicates state psychologists argued Massian may have been exaggerating or overstating his symptoms. In other words, the case now revolved around a brutal new question. Was the accused genuinely too mentally ill to proceed, or was he presenting himself that way in an attempt to avoid the full consequences of a first-degree murder prosecution? That distinction mattered enormously. If he was incompetent, the criminal case could not simply move ahead as normal. If he was malingering, then the mental health claims were not just a medical issue. They became part of the legal strategy and part of the moral tension surrounding the case. Because families of victims are asked to endure more waiting, more uncertainty, and more hearings, all while the memory of what happened remains unchanged. For Brenda and Terry Aultman's loved ones, the killings were not theoretical. The loss was final. Every delay likely meant more emotional strain, more public revisiting of painful facts, and more time before any formal conclusion. Eventually, public reporting indicates that in late 2023, Massian was deemed competent to proceed. Prosecutors were reportedly prepared to seek the death penalty. That escalated the stakes even further. The case now carried the possibility of a capital prosecution, which meant the legal battle could become even longer, even more technical, and even more emotionally punishing for everyone involved. Then in May 2025, the case took its final decisive turn. Jean-Robert Massian entered a no-contest plea to 2 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The plea ended the prospect of a lengthy trial and ensured that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. For some observers, that was justice. For others, it may have felt incomplete, particularly because the death penalty had been under consideration. Public reactions from family members reflected that complexity. There was relief that the process was over and that he would not return to the street. But there was also the recognition that no legal outcome could truly restore what was taken. And that is one of the hardest truths in true crime. A case can be solved and still feel unresolved. The legal system can identify the person responsible, secure a plea, impose life without parole, and close the docket. But emotionally, a case like this keeps asking the same questions. Not just who did it, not just how it happened, but why a harmless couple on their way home had to cross paths with a stranger whose presence would destroy multiple families in minutes. That lingering question is why the case continues to resonate. There are, broadly speaking, a few ways people may try to interpret what happened. One theory is the most straightforward and also the most disturbing. that this was a truly random act, driven by instability, intoxication, or violent impulse, with no deeper target than opportunity. That theory is supported by the lack of any publicly established connection between Messiaen and the Aultmans, along with police statements suggesting the couple was followed and attacked without provocation. What weakens it, if anything, is not the evidence but the human mind's resistance to accepting randomness. People want a motive that feels proportional. But this case does not seem to offer one. Another theory focuses more heavily on mental illness. Defense experts reportedly described severe psychiatric symptoms, and the competency litigation gave those claims real weight in court. That theory matters because it may help explain behavior that otherwise feels senseless. But it does not erase responsibility, and public reporting indicates state experts challenge the severity or sincerity of those symptoms. That leaves the mental health dimension as important, but not necessarily definitive in explaining every part of the crime. A third, broader interpretation is that the case reflects the danger created when a crowded public event spills into vulnerable spaces. Bike Week itself did not cause the killings. That would be too simplistic. But the environment may have created the conditions in which a person could move anonymously, follow a couple through a city still full of noise, and vanish long enough to force investigators into a race against time. In that sense, the case also raises questions about safety at major public events, the limits of surveillance, and how quickly ordinary space can turn dangerous. But maybe the biggest issue this case touches is the fear of random violence. Not the kind rooted in organized conspiracy or hidden long-term plotting, the kind that strikes because one person's path crosses another's at the worst possible second. That fear is hard to process because it offers so little control. The Aultmans were together. They were near home. They were on a route that likely felt familiar. There is no strong public indication they knowingly stepped into a high-risk confrontation. And still, according to investigators, they were targeted. That makes the story feel less distant. It is not just about Daytona Beach. It is not just about Bike Week. It is about the collapse of a basic expectation people carry every day, that normal life will remain normal for one more hour. Instead, in this case, one night out became a murder investigation, then a public manhunt, then a courtroom battle over sanity and responsibility, and finally a life sentence that closed the case on paper without making it feel emotionally complete. Brenda and Terry Aultman are the reason this story matters, not because of the horror alone, but because they were real people with routines, plans, family, humor, and a life they had only recently begun building in the place they wanted to call home. That is what should remain at the center of the story, not just the killer, not just the legal complexity, the couple whose future ended on a street they should have been able to travel safely. And even now, years later, that final stretch home still feels haunting because they were almost there. The case of Brenda and Terry Aultman is, in one sense, solved. Authorities identified a suspect, made an arrest, secured a plea, and the man charged in their deaths will remain in prison for life. But in another sense, the story never stops asking questions. How do two people vanish from ordinary safety in a matter of minutes? What really happens inside a mind that commits an act investigators describe as senseless? And is a case ever truly over when the answer to why still feels incomplete? For the people who love Brenda and Terry, the legal ending was never going to be the same thing as peace. Public records may close. Sentencing may happen. News coverage may slow down. But the absence stays. If this case stayed with you, share your thoughts carefully and respectfully. What do you think explains the attack as authorities described it? Do you see this as random violence, severe mental collapse, or some combination of both? Share your theory in the comments. Pass this video along to someone who follows serious true crime, and subscribe for more deeply researched documentaries told with care. And as always, in any active case, if you ever have real information, the right place for that is law enforcement, not the internet.
Gene was located at his home in Orlando and detained as officers searched the apartment. Still wearing the distinctive hat that he had on in Daytona Beach, he calmly carried on a conversation with detectives. Gene asked few questions and seemed relatively undisturbed by his arrest. Taking advantage of his demeanor, detectives engaged him in a casual, often overtly flattering exchange, building a rapport that would hopefully pay off later. They learned that Gene was originally from Haiti. He had immigrated to Florida as a child over 22 years before. He told detectives that he had lost his mother to the coronavirus 6 months earlier. Detectives empathized with the suspected murderer and kept him talking.
Really? Just consistently in the gym, like eating healthy and everything?
I'm not in the gym, but because I don't have the transportation, so I always walk.
Right.
So I just there, and I kept doing the walking with the workout.
Yeah.
Continue what I'm doing. So.
Oh yeah. That's where it's at, man. It's like I can tell you, like you're like a bigger guy, like you're like a muscular guy.
I'm small.
Small guy. Your arms, man, they're bigger than my arms are.
No, because you got me in the handcuffs.
Fair enough.
You got me in the handcuffs. So.
I think you're being a little modest, but no, I got you. What's your favorite John Wayne movie?
The Good, the Bad, and the...
My man. That's my favorite too. Oh.
Gene McKean had no discernible connection to Vann and Brenda Aultman. He had no connection to Daytona Beach. His criminal record was minimal and consisted only of minor drug charges. He had no documented history of violent behavior. Detectives speculated the tattoos on his arms could have been gang-related, but there was no confirmation of this activity. One of his tattoos, showing the numbers 1804 on the back of his right arm, was identical to the one photographed on the suspect at Daytona Beach. There was no doubt that Gene McKean was the man captured following the Aultmans' home just days before. There was just no clear reason why he had done so.
He's just unusually calm, so.
You know why?
Not sure yet. Not entirely sure. Some strange details. This was probably the strangest one I've ever seen. Very, very weird. So.
We're gonna put him in a marked car. So
yeah, perfect. Yeah, give him a little air conditioning too, and keep him nice and relaxed.
Yeah, he's pretty calm. So
yeah,
it's because he's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but yeah.
Who do you live here with?
My stepdad, my dad.
Your dad. Who else?
And my brother.
What's your brother's name?
Gene McKean.
Okay. All right. How long have you guys lived here for?
Probably like a year. Probably going on a year.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Have you always lived with your brother?
Yeah.
Okay. Is he? Do you have any idea why we're here at all?
Yeah. The gym just texted us about a homicide.
Who did?
The gym. That was the job I work at.
They text you about a homicide?
Yeah. They said if you see this client, if you see this person, then I was like, this is my brother. And it was like, wow. I was like, wow, okay.
I noticed he got some gang tattoos on his arm. Like, is he ever involved in any kind of gang?
No, he just has that because when we were growing up, because you know how they used to be like, you know, the growing up stuff, but he never been no gang stuff. Like,
okay.
You know, no, he's not that. He acts like, you know, when we're growing up, we think we somebody, but we're not.
I got you.
Yeah.
Gene's brother explained that following the loss...
You ever like violent or anything? Nah, angry at all? Or?
Nah, he was probably angry at my mom, him and my mom always getting arguments. But he was never angry at people. People like him.
Okay.
But yeah.
He seems like a pretty likable guy, just kind of soft-spoken, quiet and everything.
Yeah.
So.
That's why I'm like, damn.
So do you think that he would be capable of committing like
like I seen Snap, bro. I told you I've been watching those little weird videos. I don't know anybody capable of anything, but
you've seen him snap before though?
No, never to the kill anybody. Like no, we never go that far. We fight each other and then yeah. You know? Yeah. That's it. Well, we forgive each other and move on.
Okay.
Well, sure, that's crazy.
All right, fair enough.
Officers searching the apartment found it in a state of disarray. The room where Gene stayed was particularly chaotic. Through the mess, they recovered clothing matching the items worn by Gene in Daytona. They also found multiple knives, one of which was the likely murder weapon.
We're going to get you out of here soon, man. You doing all right? You sure? You look a little stressed out. I mean, rightfully so, but...
I'll just look at my brother seeing me and hear this.
You don't like that? No, I got you. I wouldn't want my brother seeing me in this situation either. So do you have any idea why the Daytona Beach Police Department would want to come and talk to you? Okay. Have you left Orlando in the past few days at all?
Past few days, I was at the beach on Sunday.
Where out on the beach?
Daytona.
Okay. All right, so you went out to the beach on Sunday. Do you know what you did there? Do you remember where you went or anything?
No, just the beach.
Just the beach and nowhere else? So you went to the beach with your cousins and everything, or you said, who was it, your cousin? Okay. So from there, you went to the beach, and what, did you guys stay out there in a hotel or anything?
No, right there we done with the beach, we went straight back home.
So, okay. Gotcha. So did you go anywhere else other than the beach? So when you drove into town, you went straight to the beach and then you went straight home?
Yeah, it's like a little day, like, you know, our family day, just go to the beach.
Okay. So did you go walking around ever by yourself at all? No, never by yourself. What if I told you that I know that you didn't just go to the beach?
What's that?
We know you didn't just go to the beach. Okay, we have proof that you didn't go to the beach. Okay, and you need to come out and you need to be honest with it, because right now you're lying, and what you're doing is you're backing yourself into a corner. You see what I'm saying?
Why am I lying?
We know that you didn't go to the beach. We know you went other places other than the beach. Okay.
Gene was shown a still image of himself taken near the crime scene on the night of the murder. After that, he fell silent.
Yeah, it's you. We know where you were. Listen, man. You gotta be honest with me now, okay?
Unlock your stay for less.
When Gene sat down with Daytona detectives, they sought to maintain and further build upon the friendly and trusting rapport they had established in Orlando.
What's your favorite food, man? What's your favorite food?
I don't have a favorite.
You don't like, is Mexican food your favorite? Italian food? International food?
I'm not picky.
No.
Gene was willing to talk, yet over the course of the first 2 hours, he continued to insist that he could not recall anything from that night. He spoke often of his mother. He also routinely pointed to the amount of Haitian whiskey he had been consuming that night.
I just went on vacation.
Okay, but did someone try to attack you while you were there? Did somebody mess with you? Did they bother you? Did they come at you? Did you have to defend yourself? What was it? You don't know. What was it, Gene?
I don't know exactly.
Okay.
You're saying you don't remember. Okay. I think you do. Okay.
I'm telling you the truth. That's all I can remember. Because I know losing a mother, I don't know how it feels to lose a mother. You feel me?
I lost mine. And I get it. We talked about that, and I understand.
Gene could piece together parts of his trip to Daytona. He remembered going to the beach on Sunday morning, the day after the Aultmans had been killed. He recalled awakening that morning as though from a trance, covered in blood and with no memory of the previous night.
Do you think that's you? Is that you?
Yes.
Of course it is. Where's your pants and boots at that you got rid of? Where are they? Because you woke up with them.
That's what I'm saying.
Where are they?
I don't know.
When you woke up from this trance, did you realize that you had blood all over you?
No, I just woke up.
What did you do? What did you think when you had all this blood on your pants?
No, for real. I just woke it's like you just woke up. You just see what you have on you, and you just find out where you at, and you just make a call.
Where did you said you didn't stay anywhere.
I didn't.
I know. You made a phone call.
Yeah.
What was the person's name that you called? Daft. And who's Daft to you?
That's my cousin.
Is that a female or male?
That's a female.
An hour into the interview, Gene was left alone in the room.
Oh my goodness, Lord. What did I do, man? What did I do? Think. What did I do? Can you explain what did I do, bro? What did I do?
Gene's memory began to return. He recalled passing the Aultmans on the street. He said he was drunk, stressed, and that something undefinable pulled him towards the couple.
But it's a depressant. Alcohol is a depressant. It changes your mood, sometimes for the worse.
It was like this. It was like they passed by.
Mm-hmm.
After they passed by, it's like I was like gone back. I was tired, like fatigued.
Right.
And then I knew you saw me pause.
Right.
That's why I feel like something is
pulling you.
I knew you that part to the whole thing.
Yeah. So,
especially I was very stressing
from everything, from your whole life. Did you maybe hit him first, and then once he fell down, then you started attacking her, or do you think that maybe did you push him? Did you hit him? Did you maybe you started attacking him first?
He fell.
Do you remember how he fell?
He was drunk too.
Okay. So he kind of stumbled and fell down. Was he saying anything when this was happening, or was she saying anything?
As Jean grew more comfortable speaking with the detective,